rally for O'Shea Sibley right now in New York, and I'm happy to report that the suspect is in custody. The suspect that was caught on video is in
Oh, wow.
custody as we speak. So I guess we'll find out if they're going to be arraigned and what's going to happen with that. Yeah, it has really brought up some conversations about race in our country just on the internet. It's been really interesting to see how many people just coming off of last week's conversation about trans women versus cis women and whether we should call them that, and who has the right to be a woman and who's more of a woman and who's not, and how race is a part of that. And now race is clearly a part of there's just some tension seems to be ever so present in conversations and definitely in the comments when it comes to topics of race as related to Black folks and Black LGBTQ folks. Black folks and LGBTQ. Those two topics seem to be exploding.
As if they're
Exactly.
dichotomous, and never the same thing. Something I had to years ago in my 20s really kind of try to figure out is like the difference between race and
Yeah.
ethnicity, because I don't think it's not really something that we're taught in school, where race is really about your physical characteristics, and ethnicity is more culture and language and rituals and
And
music
then
and
there's
all that stuff. That's more
nationality, and
ethnicity.
there's other things that
Yeah,
play into it. And we're going to talk about this today. If
yeah.
you haven't guessed, our theme today is race. And welcome, by the way, to a town hall, a Black queer podcast, the podcast where we journey through a theme by sharing stories, music, poetry, and art of varying depth and hilarity, and I'll say seriousness sometimes. And today's episode is Rice! Rice!
Race. Um, do people still go to you and say
Girl,
that still to this
still.
day?
And now what's even worse is white folks will go up and do it. And then now Black folks will go up and not do it, but ask me, do white people still scream race at you? And they do that in public. And so I can't escape it.
You and I, during the pandemic, created probably 3 or 4 massive viral moments between race
Fracking.
fracking, and of course,
Oh, it's fashion.
is it fashion?
And my
Yeah.
favorite one, which was still can't be boiled down into like 2 words, like the race, fracking, and fashion are like a couple of words. My favorite one, the one where I lost it, was when we were streaming on, I think it was my Twitch.
Oh,
The
the
ads, the
ads.
ads, the ads.
Listen, did we just come back from
We can't.
break it to have Pep and Bob calling us
Yes,
broke
it was like
bitches?
I was like I was losing it. I lost it. Uh,
That was a good one.
yeah,
That was a good one. I love creating
me
moments with you. I really,
too.
really do. Which I'm so happy to be doing this podcast with you. And the subject of race. I've been reading this book called Afro Pessimism. I think I mentioned it in
Yeah.
the last podcast. And also like reviewing Dr. Angela Davis's conversations about
Mhm.
race, and of course you and I do a lot of work centered around being Black people and being queer people,
Mhm.
because that is where a chunk of our intersectionality that you and I share.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that sometimes I don't know, are race relations getting better?
Okay, so this is the thing. Just like folks who are regardless of what side of any issue that you fall on, if you're in the United States or have access to the internet and social media and social media accounts that are American ones, you would see that there's a lot of conversation, a lot of energy put into LGBTQ conversation about LGBTQ people, existence, rights, especially trans rights. We know this. It's on the top of, so many people's minds right now. We just heard that in Florida there was news that there was a move to remove AP psychology, from high school, AP, which we know is a college credit course taken in high school, AP psychology from I don't know if it's all high school levels or from high school in Florida, and because on the grounds that it addresses gender and sexuality because it's psychology. And there's actually some black folks. I saw this on. I think I saw it on in the shade room. So
Stay
I
out of the
know.
shade room.
I
Stay
know,
out
I know.
of the
Listen, I
shade
can't.
room.
I saw some people.
I need
I'm
it.
assuming they're black. We know when it kind of feels like us. Um, Commenting, saying, "Good, we don't need," repeating the same kind of talking points that we heard many right wing politicians, mostly white politicians, spewing and saying just a couple of years ago. Good, we don't need that kind of indoctrination in our kids in school. They should wait until they're 18 to hear about all that gender stuff. It's imaginary. And I'm not going to act like that the black community didn't have some reckoning to do when it came to queerness and sexuality uh, years ago, right? But this
Mhm.
new version of it, this new turfy version of it, feels real. It just isn't feeling right. It just isn't sitting right. And so my point is, I do, but I just in spite of all that, with race relations, with LGBTQ relations, and also the moments of those that intersect, I do believe that it's getting better. I want to believe, and I do believe that the majority of people, the majority of women, cisgender women, are actually supportive of trans individuals, trans women in particular. I do believe that the majority of white people in this country are supportive of and supportive of black folks, are recognize their privilege in being white, and also recognize and understand how the systems of how the different systems that exist in our country and the world affect different people differently, and how the systems of oppression like misogyny and homophobia and racism, systemic racism, that the American brand of that are very specific in their impact on black folks and people of color in this country. And I do think that the majority of white folks understand that, and I also believe that the majority of black folks, are loving and caring to LGBTQ folks, black or not. I do believe that. That's my belief. And so I'm not daunted by the fact that there is still work to do, and knowing that there's still conversations that have to be had. If I was the only one in this country, or if you and I were the only people in this country, and we had to convince every other human being in this country, I'd be like, honey, let's just go get some ice cream. But I think we
It's
can do
a
the work.
wrap. Y- I think that it took me a while to realize that progress, not just racial progress, but we were talking about race. Racial progress is not linear.
And and it's not
Like
complete.
I remember hearing, it's like I remember viewing it as an arc because that quote, "The moral arc
Ben's
of the
to,
universe is
mhm.
long, but it bends towards justice." But it's not really an arc because it's kind of like doing this and then this and then that and then this and then it's like pinging back and forth. It's more like a game of pong, and we're just gonna find out if the ball's gonna go to the side of justice or to the side of inequality. And it just keeps binging back and forth. And sometimes, someone gets a good hit and it's hard to recover, and it bounces a few times on the same side. But it is. There have been moments where I have thought, because there have been moments where I've thought to myself, like, we gotta get out of here. The other moments where I'm like, I would never leave. Like,
This
I
is
ain't leaving
mine.
nothing.
And then there's
I'm
like,
not
where are
leaving
we gonna
nothing.
go? Where can we go that racism and misogyny haven't touched?
The moon,
Bitch, there were some couple of white men
maybe.
on the moon. It touched there too. The American
True.
flag is on the
True. I
moon.
don't know. Girl, we gotta go to Mars. We gotta go on one of Jupiter's moons. This is wild. This is
Yeah.
wild.
I do
Um
wanna say, oh, mhm.
also there's aliens now. So like
Now,
now we have aliens. Are they gonna what are the aliens gonna like? Are they gonna be like? Are the aliens gonna be like? What is happening? I know there has been where the aliens are like, y'all, this is. I don't want to sound offensive, but and I have done research on your planet, and I know this word is triggering, but this is ghetto.
not on the race
Like y'all,
episode.
y'all's country is kind of it's giving ghetto because this whole planet is so there's no way that the aliens came, saw what we got going on, and were like, I want to hang out here. They must have saw it and was like, don't stop. It's like if you're walking through the woods or driving through and you see like a bunch of bees, and it's like, bitch, roll the windows up and keep driving because this
Well, I
place is
mean, especially when we
madness.
consider the connection between uh, racism, misogyny, I mean, racism and patriarchy, its connections to war and capitalism, Christianity, and then capitalism and imperialism and colonialism, and how and though the impact of all that on the planet, right? And so that is inextricable. Like it's you know, an alien would
Yeah,
not
aren't the
an
aliens
alien be
like
like,
y'all
oh,
still
their trees are dying, and because these rich white men are like getting richer and whiter and not whiter, and starving
even whiter than before?
starving the
Now whiter than
starving the
ever.
planet of its resources and utilizing the labor of their own people as sort of like fuel.
Well, I feel like at some point, like the aliens would get here and be like, "Wait, y'all are literally fighting over diamonds? Do you know these literally fall from the sky in Uranus? Like they literally
I
these
know I
things you
gotta go
guys are
to get
literally like
checked by the
killing each other over.
doctor.
They just they just fall from the sky in Uranus. I guess everyone's saying
Yeah,
Uranus now, which I was like, I grew up when I grew up, we were definitely saying Uranus,
it's my
right?
birth planet, Uranus.
Yeah, we ain't nobody saying no damn
But
Uranus. Ain't
Uranus
nobody
also
saying
like
no
no matter what,
Uranus.
it's a losing battle. Uranus sounds like pee, and Uranus sounds like
Urine.
your
Yeah,
butt.
urine.
Anyway,
Listen, if you're anyway, with that being said,
we
we should
should, but
probably
I do want to
get things
remind
started because
people, tell people you were talking about what's the book? I'm sorry,
Afro
Afro
pessimism.
pessimism. Um, I do want to tell people that I didn't read any books this week. I am reading a new audiobook, Survival of the Thickest, which I am really happy to say I can promote a book that's on sale right now, penned by Michelle Buteau. A lot of people may not know that other projects that have come out since she wrote the book are based on the book, which we can promote. We can't promote the other projects, but we can promote the book called Survival of the Thickest. And so I think people should just Google it and check it out. But I'm not reading.
That sounds
It's
like a
a
good
good book.
book.
Yeah,
That sounds
it's
like a
not a
good
good
book.
book. I do want to tell people that I watched over the weekend two really interesting things on TV. Um, one is a documentary called High. They're both documentaries. Docu series is, I guess, High on the Hog. Uh,
I say they better not be scripted. Whatever
They're
you was
not
watching.
scripted. High on the Hog, how African American cuisine impacted American cuisine, African American culture and cuisine impacted, and it goes
Interesting.
back to before we came here. And there were some really interesting and
You make it sound so pleasant.
before
Just
we were
before we
brought here,
just
before
kind
we were
of decided
enslaved
to
and
come hang
forced to
out.
come here and forced to cook for other people. Um, and so please check that out. It goes into how some of the ingredients that we value and cherish today are ingredients that came from the cuisine and the expertise, the cultural culinary artistry of Africans before they were enslaved and brought here, and then literally traveled over on the ships with us. Also, talks about how sort of the dichotomy between what we think of as really uppity, sort of like high class dining and cuisine. Some of those origins, like for instance, oysters, eating oysters, some of that came from Black Americans here. Not just eating oysters, but sort of the specialty in creating oysters as a culinary thing was stuff that was perfected first by Black Americans in this country, particularly down in,
You heard it. Black people invented
no, no, no.
oysters. We have made it.
But one
We
of
made
the
oysters
first
from
successful
scratch, honey.
oyster restaurants was owned by a Black man who was working down in New York City was an oyster town, originally. Um, and
I ain't eating no damn oysters out the motherfucking
I
Hudson
know,
River.
dude, that ain't an
Imagine
oyster.
eating
That ain't an
anything that comes
oyster.
out,
No, but it
girl.
was before.
You eat something out the
Yeah.
you eat something out the East River. You want it to be your last
Well,
motherfucking
I
meal,
wouldn't eat
bitch. I
anything that
promise
comes
you
out of the
that.
East or West River now because of all the industry that's there and all the pollution. But before there was in the age of industrialization, there was people were fishing in New York was the whole Northeast is a there's New England is a lobster town and there's like all this shellfish has come from Northeast. Anyway,
Fun fun fact: the Hudson River is not a
it's a
river. It's
canal.
actually an
Oh, it's a what?
estuary. It's an estuary, and I realized this one day when I was walking home from I used to walk over the Hudson River, and I looked down one day and I said, "Oh my god, it's flowing in a different direction than it was when I went to work. It's literally reverse paths, and it's now flowing in the opposite." I was like, "Rivers don't flow both ways. Rivers don't give bisexuality. Rivers don't go both ways. Honey, rivers they got their one path. They do their one thing." And then I googled it, and it's an estuary
Oh, what
apparently.
is that? It's like, is that different than a tributary?
I don't even know what a
Hey Google,
tributary
what's a
is, but I know it's different
tributary?
than a dignitary.
It's a river or stream that flows into a larger river or lake. Uh,
Oh, you be knowing
I be
words.
knowing
You
words,
be
but
knowing
another
words.
word
Look
I
at
be
you.
knowing. Hey Google, be quiet and shut up. Um, another.
Okay, listen. When the computers take
I
over,
know.
you have to be nice
Okay.
because Google's
It's
gonna
gonna be
remember
like,
that.
look,
Google's gonna be
bitch.
like,
Remember how you talk to me? Talk to
Peppermint,
me
I
nice.
remember one time you told me to shut up.
That's
So
not the worst
maybe
thing I ever
now
told this
you
thing to
should
do.
shut the fuck
Trying to be
up.
like,
Maybe now,
you can shut the,
maybe now you should
and
shut
it's
the
gonna
fuck up.
zap my mouth. Listen, let
Yeah.
me tell you, the oysters, the ingredients coming over. One of the things that I didn't know is that our first president of the United States, and then also early presidents who we knew were who held slaves and owned slaves, um, and enslaved human beings. Uh, you know, obviously they were cooking for them. The enslaved people were cooking for these slave masters. Um,
Thank you for clearing that up.
just in
I
case.
thought you meant George. I thought you meant George Washington was like, y'all. I'm gonna grab my
Thomas
sister. Y'all want
Jefferson
something too?
took.
If y'all want something, let me know because I'm
We
going to
all
go to
know
the kitchen and
Sally
grab a
Hemings.
biscuit. And if
We
you
all know
want
Sally
one,
Hemings, but one of her sons, who was also an enslaved person, obviously, and allegedly uh, Thomas Jefferson's son, was a renowned chef and created some of the is partially responsible for some of the dishes, many of the dishes that have come over the French cuisine that has come over to the United States. A lot of the traces of French cuisine that are deep in the United States cuisine and culture, like macaroni and cheese, were first brought over.
he made French fries.
Bitch,
He made French fries.
bitch, you
Tell
are
me he made French fries.
macaroni and mother sucking
Because
cheese, bitch. I'm talking about that.
if he made French fries, I'm about to be like, hey.
I'm talking about macaroni and cheese. Let's not reduce this.
Okay.
That's a good enough contribution.
No, mac and cheese
Yeah.
is great. French fries are
So
massive.
it's
Just to be
macaroni and cheese.
clear,
But the point is that
which
it's a
if you had
French
to choose one,
dish
if you had to
that
choose
was
one, which
brought
one would you
over
be?
because
If you had to choose one, would you choose mac and cheese or French fries? If you had to choose one, this is a tough choice, right?
it's a tough choice.
For the rest of the time.
I mean, listen, French fries are a finger food. It's not really a dish. You know what I mean? They're a snack. You don't sit down. I mean, like yeah, macaroni and cheese is like more of a. It used to be called macaroni pie. Anyway, the point is, can I get to the point? The point is, watch this TV show. It's called High on the Hog, and it really goes into the
Oh, got it.
contributions. I think that one of the things that was really interesting in a day and age where places like Florida are going through the curriculum and removing the things we already know about the contributions, and the accurate portrayal and histories of Black people in this country. Some of the stuff that we know we didn't know most of the stuff, and how catering, the concept of catering in the United States was first done and brought to us by a Black family. It's on record. Before that, there wasn't the concept of catering in the United States. So much of when we say Black folks built this country, it's more than just Black folks put up a house. we really did, create and fortify the systems that are running through this country still. And so High on the Hog really just a beautiful sense, give me a beautiful sense of validation. And I learned a lot. And so people should watch it. Another one that people should watch.
Well,
I know we gotta go. I know
I'm
we
really
gotta go.
intrigued by
People should
people.
tell me.
Well, I want to say something. I'm really intrigued by the notion that people are like, you know, people, especially people who are like, no shade, like third generation Americans who are like Italian, and I'm like, telling, have the nerve to tell a black person go back where they came from. Like, baby, the first slave ship got here in like 1619. How dare you talk about it? Like, black folks are as American as like have been here since 1619, Miss
Yes, Mama
Mamas.
Girl.
So like, imagine. Imagine your grandparents came through Ellis Island and you have the nerve to tell me to go back somewhere.
I know.
Girl,
Hello.
okay.
And then the other one, I'll be quick with this one. It's called Descendants. And I don't know if you watched that. This came out like a couple of years ago. And it talks about how after the abolition of slavery and after the Emancipation Proclamation and even after Juneteenth, there was still a fully stocked, loaded ship of enslaved humans that came over from Africa, obviously, and brought to Georgia. I'm sorry, Alabama, Mobile, Alabama. Um, I can't remember what the name of the ship was, but it came over a few years later, basically on a bet. A white man who owned some businesses said, "I on a bet." I bet you I can still get some slaves over here we will bring them here and they will work for us as slaves. And that's exactly what he did. And they basically lived kind of quiet as enslaved people for the people in this neighborhood. They didn't bring them and just distribute them all over the country. They brought in
Mhm.
this boat and got these enslaved people, these getting ready to be enslaved people, off the boat and kept them there, and then quietly worked them into the neighborhood and then that became a small
What's
town,
called the
the Clotilda,
Clotilda
yeah.
or the
And it's
Clotilda.
the is what became A- Africa Town, is what they called it, and it was still known as Africa Town up until like modern day. And that history was
110 African men, women, and children
Yeah,
were on
and
the
that
ship.
history was hidden, obviously. These businesses, these men were able to establish businesses, agricultural businesses, and industrial businesses that allowed them to have generational wealth, generate generational wealth, and pass that on to their families that are still existing today on the backs of these people who were brought to this country as slaves and made to work as slaves, kept from education, uh, and no one stepped in to help. No, and that history was burned and protected. They burnt the ship, and anyway, so there's a documentary about the ship, the effort to locate the actual ship, which was they couldn't keep the proof. They had this slave ship, they had to burn it and sink it. And so they tried to get rid of it and hush hush, and nobody, these people are just here. That the whole kind of reconciliation of all of that, of some of that, is in this film. It's called Descendants, and it's a brilliant movie. People should watch it.
And and now I want to hear from some more amazing takes and ideas and some really nuanced thinking. So to here to help us extrapolate on the subject of race, let's hear from Cal State LA professor Dr. David Green.
I'm David Green, Dr. Green. I'm a professor of women's gender and sexuality studies at California State University, Los Angeles. Really, I'm an African Americanist, and so I study issues of identity around Black people at the intersections of race, gender, and sexuality. So, and I really focus on Black, queer, everybody. For me personally, on the individual level, I see America as historically um, a mess, but I also want to be hopeful and say it's a place of possibilities if in fact we can all think about it in that way. I'm a Black gay man. I'm from the inner city. I'm effeminate. I grew up in impoverished conditions without much of my family, only my sisters, and so for me it was a struggle. It was a real struggle to see this place as in America where I could thrive. But I had the most wonderful people surrounding me, mostly Black and brown women, educators. My band teacher was a white woman, and she's the reason I got into music, and she's the reason I was able to then not only attend some of the best public schools in Jacksonville, but then go on to attend universities. And so it is a place of hope, but I do not want to romanticize that at all. America can be very dangerous for people of color. What is race? Well, my students, if you're in my classroom, I'll simply just say this: it's a social construct. And then my students will say, well, what is a social construct? And the everyday person, I would say race is a fiction. What that really means is that people are born into this idea around what does it mean to be Black before they ever understand it, right? And so they try to fulfill those expectations, whether you're Black or Latino or person of color. But race is how the world organizes us around differences, essentially. And those differences have to deal with who's white, who's what's your hue? I'm a very dark skinned man. I'm Black. So that's what I mean by what race is. And it's unstable. There's going to be so many people who have so many different understandings of race. Academics will say it is a social construct, it's a fiction, and it's not real. But it has real implications for a lot of people. How race functions kind of like, collectively in the Black discourse, we have something called the Black diaspora or the African diaspora, right? So I have been taught that there is this kind of global Black community, right? Even if I have never been to Africa, for example. I have been taught that I am from a bloodline of kings and queens who love each other, even though I had never been to Africa. But I identify with, my African roots in real and practical ways. Like I have the kente cloth, for example. When I had the option to study different languages, I studied the Haitian language because I felt like it was the first independent, place or country in this world. And I wanted to identify with that, even though I'm not Haitian and Haitian is a Caribbean, place, right? So it is this kind of floating global Blackness, even in Europe. When we think about Black Germans or Black Europeans, there's this sense that you're Black, I'm Black. And that doesn't mean that they're kind of like no differences or contestations. I'm not going to automatically get along with you, but I'm going to identify at the root that, there's some community and family there. Historically, it was coming to a sense of who we are through struggle and pain, right? The enslavement of Black people, the theft of Black people from our homelands into this kind of ideal of a place that was colonial, pre-colonial America. As a person today, I take from that knowing and understanding that I am not going to try to inflict violence on you because I understand that history follows us, right? I understand that there is some unprocessed pain and trauma. So at the individual, everyday level, I really, really, really do try to move with the space of joy and excitement and pleasure and spreading that. And as I tell my story about why is that so important to you, I do bring in the kind of personal, I'm a child of poverty, I'm a child of violence, I'm a child of parental abandonment. I have all of those circumstances that define me and being bullied, but I'm not going to inflict that on you because I know how it made me feel growing up and even today. And even though I was never enslaved, when I read about enslaved folks, I think and I say, this I know. I read about it. The violence was real. And yet, out of our histories, enslaved Africans or Black people who were stolen from their homelands created dance and created music and created hymnals and created food and soul food. They could have not done that, but they knew it was so deeply a part of who they are as people. Like, I still have this, and I'm going to spread this joy and this excitement. And it's in slavery. And Ron DeSantis say that, poor man, Ron. And he's saying that, slaves, enslaved Africans benefited from slavery. No, 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 no. They did not benefit. That's wrong. For you to say that that's violence, that's epistemic and systematic violence. But what Black people did do, what enslaved people did do, was to create spaces, right, where they had to survive against that oppression. And out of that creation, out of that survival, when they, when they left Africa and they brought all that goodness here, they just was like, hey, we're going to do this. Right. And I try to remind people, at least at my level and in the classroom with my family, let's talk about our pains, but also let's remember the love and the joy. I center Black people and Blackness in everything that I do. It's like Issa Rae said, I'm rooted for everybody Black. Now, Issa Rae may not be an African Americanist, but that statement was African Americanist, right, in its essence. And at the fundamental level, because we have been so decentered, right, in the global ideal of humanity, and in the kind of colonial experience that is America today, have been so decentered in that my job is to reposition us Black people within that kind of authentic knowledge making, joy creating space, right? So it's not to say that I see my brown brothers, sisters, and sibs, right, as any less important, because I do a comparative analysis of everything. But I do want to pass on the knowledge, like Langston Hughes and the folks in the Harlem Renaissance did for everyone else today, is to pass on to say, you matter, you're worthy, you can produce a culture that's beautiful and loving and exciting and worth remembering. I think for me, centering Blackness as an African American is an act of both resistance and love. A quick example of this: when I was in high school or in undergrad, in English courses, for example, all the writers were white, old white men. I have Walt Whitman somewhere on my, this. Now Walt Whitman is white. Now he's white, and he was also gay, and so. And I learned a lot from Walt Whitman and, Thoreau and all those folks. But what it says when you do not include people of color in the curriculum is that we're not worthy of study. What you have to say doesn't matter. It doesn't contribute to anything worth thought, contribution, or anything. My job then is to do that, right? That's why I position it, is to fight against the belief that Black people are inherently intellectually inferior to everyone else, right? It is to then say, and I was accused of this in graduate school a lot, to the point when I started writing about it. You celebrate your Black queer writers too much. Your writing and research is too celebratory. And I never resisted it then in graduate school. But I have done so now. I said, what's wrong with celebrating Black people and Black queer people? It was Black people who did not understand gayness or queerness. They had a real fine sense of Blackness from a very particular viewpoint. Often it was straight Black men in some senses, and on occasion women, but they were all straight, cisgender, heterosexual, straight. And I read today, I'm like, this is a work of celebration, even though they may not see it that way. But when I started to talk about Black queer people at my institution, and I tried to work with people to usher me through they could not see that, right? And at the time, I couldn't see that that's what they were doing. It took a lot of growing up for me. And it came from white people, white academics who said, well, this is too celebratory. And I'm like, well, you can't see the intersection of the Black and the queerness because you have so prioritized white gayness. The Black church and its influence of kind of Western theology and colonialism and those missionaries who went to Black countries to really civilize the African did it through religion, right? And so that has been passed down in the Black church, which suppresses women in leadership position, Black women, and also refuses to have conversations about sexuality writ large, historically. So in some cases that may have changed. I've seen, Black male pastors who welcome queer sexuality, and I've seen Black gay pastors, right? So it's slowly changing. But the Black community, at least the Southern Black community writ large, have always found ways to accept. And it's always, I don't want to romanticize and say, if a person come out that they want to experience violence from the family, because that certainly has been and will continue to be the case. But at large, we have to understand that, there is the Black church in those public big institutions. And then there are people in our communities who are okay with it to a degree, in which some people might be super religious and say, well, you got to repent. because, God don't like that. And then you had some people who are not religious or who may be religious say, you live your life because I love you nonetheless. So in many ways, it's a both and, or it's a not easy answer, but certainly we can't conflate the Black church as the all in and totalness of the Black community on the one hand, because it dismisses and ignores those everyday folks who are willing to, like my mother, for example, just hug me and say, yeah, we know, live your life. On the one end, I am Black. That should be a share, but I'm dark skinned. So in communities of color, there is colorism and there's a hierarchy, right, of colorism. And as a dark person, as a dark, you know, someone called me jet black growing up. That meant that I was equally, or the taunting, right? Well, you're ugly because you're so dark, and so because you're ugly, I can treat you any kind of way. You know, no one desires you as a dark person. And then I was effeminate, you know. So you have dark and effeminate. That I think were the issues. And it was kind of always already it's intersectional. I can't say, well, it's only because I was dark or it was only because I was feminine. I think it was a combination of those. And that follows me. Even as an adult, it's not discussed as a form of trauma. Because where I'm from, we don't discuss, or at least Black folks writ large that I know, have a hard time processing and discussing trauma. And a part of that trauma means that we can't confront how we treat each other based on our skin gradations and the harm it has on us. And so oftentimes I have felt undesirable just at a social level, right? No one wants to talk to me. No one wants to be around me. And even here in LA, when the population is mostly brown folks, I have a hard time here just socially. So I think it's rooted in so many different contexts, right? To the point where it becomes overwhelming to even try to think about how to unpack it. When we think about the most harmful treated people, they have been Black women, right? Dark-skinned Black women, both historically and in media representations. But I think that's what it was. It was the idea that you are so dark that you're ugly. And because you are ugly, I can treat you any kind of way. I don't desire you. No one desires you. No one's going to take you serious because you are dirty. You are dirty and you ugly, and you deserve this. Right. And I think that's where it comes from on the one end. And then because you are all those things, then I can operate and treat you and use you in any way that I want. And that using is medical malpractice, it's rape and it's violence, it's physical abuse, it is not paying you what you are due. So it's so many of those things, but that at the root of it, right? I'm looking at you because when we think about the tragic mulatto, right? The kind of result of the white man raping the Black woman and the ways in which or how she becomes a sense of like, who am I? But yet, hyper desired, yet hyper invisible. Like you don't matter because you're still Black, but I want to fuck you, right? Because you are light skinned, right? You are someone I desire. Your fair skin features, right? Your delicate hair, your curly hair, right? But you're Black, so I can't marry you. I can't do it. I'm just going to rape you. And it follows us. It has followed us. And I should say this, in the gay community, it is rampant. In order to get to these intraracial or interracial coalitions, we've got to get better at building community with ourselves. That history is there for us, whether we're talking about the Harlem Renaissance and, the Niggerati Manor, right, with Langston and Claude McKay and Georgia Douglas Johnson, or whether we move over to the 80s and we think about, S.S. Hemphill and the Sato Saint and Joseph Beam and then Audre Lorde and the Black Women's Collective and the Kitchen Table Women of Color Press and, those network of Black women writers. What they did is to come together and say, who are we as Black queer people? And then they started to assess, what do we want or what do we need for the communities outside, the people outside of our communities to respect from us? Like the idea of how do we want them to treat us, or what should they know about us? You're not going to disrespect me. You're not going to see me through these stereotypical lenses. I think Pat Parker said it best in her poem. She goes, "The first thing you should know about me is I'm Black, but also you need to forget that I'm Black, but don't forget I'm Black." Right. So this, so we've got to get better at building the communities. And then once we have those communities in place, we can then talk about the harm of racism or gay racism or the harm of the white community writ large or the harm of white gay men still supporting Donald Trump. Right. And those, and so, or white women still voting for Donald Trump or white people still, it is still kind of moving in their privilege, unwilling to kind of assess the harm of not thinking about the implications of their actions to the communities in which they want to come to the barbecue to. The intersection of race and wealth. Now, this might be a subject in which we all can improve because in our communities, financial literacy is needed. History and slavery kind of, ruined, right? This idea, the Black wealth, right? So the idea that we need to recover, we need to learn how to save, we need to understand, and that is not always easy. It's always going to be a struggle because not everyone can do it, right? Because we have been so crippled by a history of slavery, right? Even the New Deal, when it was in vogue, I think it was the 40s or so, it wasn't necessarily something that Black soldiers returning from the war could benefit from because they still had, restrictive housing zones and they could not rent and buy property. And, in the United States, the first sign or the first lever that you want to pull is to own a home, right? Because when you do that, you're on your way to kind of increasing equity and wealth for your family. But we still have racism in the housing market today. When I came to LA, I was going to purchase a house and I gave the woman everything she asked for me and she just didn't email me back. She saw that I didn't have a lot of money and she just kept going. So that's what I mean. So that conversation is very real. I try to my best to teach myself, but even I don't always understand like the idea of, market rate bond, all these things, right? Because in math in seventh grade, they're teaching you the fundamentals. They're not teaching you how to save or how to do investments or those things. So I think for my community, for people who look like me, it's important because we're not given silver spoons. Our communities, our Black wealth communities that were in the South, establishing themselves, were destroyed by white racists. The reason, when Black people are on the up and come, the comeuppance, the academic word, when we are coming up, it threatens white folks who feel that we no longer need them. We are in competition with them, and they can't, for people who have had everything handed to them and have not had to work, because we have had to work. So we can do anything, right? When you have not had to work, which is why people, when they claim, like at Harvard, well, they got in because of affirmative action. No, honey, I got in because my grades and my test scores, and I have had to work. And so that when we become successful and financially stable and successful, it threatens, and people don't want that competition because they're not intellectually there, they're not physically there. They wouldn't know what to do without mom's or dad's pocketbook. So, that's why those communities were burned down. Those Black communities, those Black wealth were burned down because now when you burn out, now you can go to the bank and get a loan from a white bank and be indentured to that exploitive interest rate. I believe that, people might disagree. I believe that race was socially constructed in order to kind of keep the power differentials, to keep the hierarchy, keep white people to believing that they are better and they deserve better, and that people of color and everyone who is not white is below them. That's essentially, I think, what it was created for, to keep in place these systems of division and power, and to keep white people, white men, cisgender, white Protestant men in power. This idea of what is an American, right? When you come to this country, there's an ideal about what it means to be American and who is American. And this when Donald Trump says, make America great again, he wants to go back to this idea where America was, white people was at the center of everything, at least in his mind. That, America equals white, right? America equals femininity, white femininity, proper femininity, powerful and masculine white men, right? So, in order for you to succeed in America, you have to assimilate to those ideas, which then dispossesses you of your blackness or your brownness. And so you can attain some kind of whiteness, right? And whiteness, not just in ideal of skin color, right, but in folkways and beliefs and attitudes and how you think and how you treat people. So when you go to New York City, for example, and you see those segregated communities and the Italians over here and the brown folks over there, and they're not speaking, right? Historically, the immigration, the assimilation, the politics around an ideal American was like, well, if you want to be successful, if you want to be seen as the proper American, then you have to treat and disassociate yourself from Black people. You have to treat them with such ire. You cannot associate with them. Don't talk to them, right? So we see this. I think there's a book is called Anti-Blackness around among Latinos, right? And I would say, people of color, there's anti-blackness everywhere, not just white people. There are people of color who can really just not like Black people, right? That is the result of kind of assimilating into the idea of America. Whiteness, white attitudes, which is I always get so fascinated when I meet Black and people of color Republicans. To have a kind of a white ideological attitude, right, is to somehow desire to be accepted. So not only just wealth, but I want to be accepted by these people. And I'm going to center everything I do to gain their acceptance of me as a person. Cycles repeat and they become cyclical. And then what happens is they pass it to the children. And then when the children are confronted with this, they have an existential crisis because your family has taught you that as values. So let's think about, I think in certain areas of California, but across the country, and families will kind of march to school board systems and say, I don't want my child reading that gay book. That book has sexually explicit content in it. Or that book is saying that white people are bad. And you are then saying that I value this as a Christian. I value this as a family. So when it's time for your child to enter the world, and they have those set of values which have kind of screwed them, which people can say that's a harm that does harm. They don't see it as harm; they see it as value, right? So when it's time to really confront that, and they try to, my students, a lot of them try, and they have a real existential crisis. When I was teaching a course at the University of Michigan, and I was a graduate assistant, and my professor told a white student this, that white women have been the most who have gained and benefited from affirmative action. She burst out in tears. And we had to explain to this girl, we said, well, let me tell you how, and statistically, you can go read about this. When education started in the country, the only people who can go first were white men. And then slowly but surely, when we started to desegregate along gender lines, it was white women, right? And then Black women and brown people and Black men, first Black men, they came a little later. So to think about affirmative action in that sense, right? White women have been the benefactors historically. And so when she hears this, she thinks she did something wrong, or that she now got into Michigan because she's a white woman. And it's like, maybe that's true, but maybe it's not true. We don't, I didn't judge your application. We didn't judge it. And so when she has been told that she has been there for merit reasons, and she hears something like that, she's like, she is freaking out in class. We had to console this girl. And so that's what I mean. So when I'm sitting there like, is she crying? Because I don't know what to do with this. We had to console her. And then she stopped coming to class for a little bit. And she had to have her whole conversation. So with these parents who are saying to teachers and to the people who create the curriculum that they don't want this, when their child, and sometimes when their child themselves might be queer, right? And their family is saying this, and saying that this is a value. They are really struggling because it's like, if I do this, then I'm going to be a traitor to my community and my family values. So I have to uphold these. And when they try to get rid of it, they struggle with it because they don't know how to have a conversation with their family. Even though they might have a great conversation in class, they eventually have to go back. And some people leave their communities and go elsewhere. We see this with the gay migration from the South to New York City, for example, in the 80s, and sometimes from rural to Atlanta, if you are in down south, the Atlanta gay mecca, or DC. So we see them leaving, but before they can even get there, they're having this moment where everything I taught was wrong, but how do I talk to my family about this?
Whew. Wow. Okay. If y'all thought our last episode was gonna get the comments popping and topping and popping, then I can't wait to see how y'all are thinking and feeling about this episode. The concept of race is just something that we pin so much on in this country, right? And for our benefit and also to our disadvantage, I believe. And to know that it was to realize and know and be able to have a conversation on the fact that that it's a concept that was started within our like view, like historically. This is not something that was like 5,000 BC. Like this is something that was like you know historically more recent. And we can see where it all comes from. It's really interesting. you know um
Time is a really interesting thing to perceive when you think something was really, really long ago, and we realize that it actually wasn't that long ago. Like I think like slavery was like a little less than 170 years ago, or maybe a little more at
yeah,
this
I
point.
mean,
But that's two old people back
it
to
only
back.
tracks for
That
me
is
because I
literally
have
that's Betty White and a half. That's not a lot
it's
of
not.
time. You
I
know what I
can
mean?
even use that reference personally for me. That's more closer to home, literally, than Betty White, because I have family members who died not that long ago, who were over 100 years ago, who were born into slavery. You know what I mean? Whose family,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Same. My aunt talks about how her uncle was a
mhm,
slave, and how she one day she realized she would ask him to
he
read
couldn't do
something, and
it.
he couldn't he didn't read it to her, but he wouldn't say he couldn't read. He just like kept changing the subject or something, and then someone else pulled her aside and
Don't
said,
ask him that again.
"Baby, he was a slave. He can't read. Like he never learned to read. So like, why can't he read?" And she's like, they're like, he was a slave,
Mm.
and that's my aunt who is still alive today.
I think it's just really interesting as we look like generationally at all of I just wonder what our those ancestors, what your aunt would have said about, where we are today, some of the conversations that we're having. And I think another person who'd also have a lot.
We could ask her. She's still.
let's a-
We could ask her. She's still
okay, I
alive.
didn't mean to imply that she
Aunt
wasn't with
Willie.
us.
Shout
Let's
out
let's
shout out Aunt
let's
Willie.
bring her on. Let's bring her on.
I want to ask you a question.
What's that?
Do you think we will ever get
I do.
reparations?
I do. I hear that California's working on it. There are certain locales in our country that have already started legislatively having that conversation and seeing what that looks like. And we're also realizing that we're not just talking about like the first generation of enslaved people who built a house and didn't get the paid for that job. We're talking about people, and we obviously know that this was generational. And we're talking about people. We're talking about people who were deceived into continuing to be enslaved people and continuing to use their bodies for free labor, or have their bodies used for labor and childcare and cooking and cleaning and also the work, like we talk about. I mean, she wasn't an enslaved person, but Henrietta Lacks, like our literally our DNA was used against us in a deceptive manner because of the systems that were in place from slavery, systemic racism. And so knowing that I think there's the talk about like payment and money and a monetary reparations, but then there's also talk of like just like making things right And acknowledgement of that is the first thing to happen. And because of modern technology and communication, we're able to sort of redeem the stories of our ancestors that have been lost and literally buried. Like when we talk about the Clotilda, that slave ship that brought our ancestors over here against their will after slavery was done. And they were still destined at that point to a life of slavery for at least part of their long part of their life of slavery, and also a big cut off from everything that they knew after slavery. When people say slavery ended, no, it didn't, right? And so there's no wonder why we still have.
Well, slavery was
Right,
conditionalized. It
yeah,
wasn't ended.
and
It was actually
and
conditionalized, but that's a
yeah,
whole
and
different
no,
story.
and so the thought of having a slave mentality in this conversation, there's no wonder we still have that. But the point of that is, like, yes, I do believe in reparations. I do believe, I support it. I don't know exactly how that plays out, but I do think that there's a lot that we're owed, starting with respect.
Well, according to ABC News, it'll be about $1.4 trillion in reparations today. And part of me is like, honestly, if y'all would have just
It
paid
would
for
have
it a
been
long
so
time ago, it
much
wouldn't have been
cheaper.
gotten that much money. Just hurry up. I know that's not how inflation works. 1.4 trillion is the same as it was back then. But also, like, just hurry up, do it now, and we wouldn't have been in this. Just hurry up. It's just gonna keep the number is gonna keep inflating over time, honey. And at this point, I'll take Bitcoin. At this point,
You'll
I
take.
will take a
I'll
Bitcoin
take
payment.
NFTs. You want to send me some NFT dollars? Some NFT slave dollars?
At this
Oh
point,
Lord.
literally. So we have one more person that we want to hear from today. I'm excited to hear from them. This is an interesting conversation about a Black American who has chosen to uh make the diaspora go even further. We've been displaced, then displacing again, and leaving this place. He's headed down to Mexico. So I want to hear from former musician and designer Ebony Jewel.
My name is Ebony Jewel, and what I do is nothing. I literally do nothing. I'm retired. I used to be in the game. Don't like to play no more. I still make stuff. I'm still a creative. I still have this habit of creativity and doing things, but I do nothing. I just me and my dog, you know what I mean? And trying to live without supremacy, trying to live without care of you, a thought of me, you know what I mean? Try to live with just real, like just love and not situational and not selfish. Like that love that's like mad selfish. Like, I only love you because I need something from you. Like, you guys are useless to me until I find something useful of you. You know what I mean? And that's just how I go now. It's just like, so I basically like do nothing really and just make shit and just love making things, like have a habit of it. And, that's my kink. I was a clothing designer for a very long time, a creative director for a very long time. Things in that world, you know what I mean, in that industry where, it's about trying to gouge somebody else to get better, try to hurt somebody else to look better, try to get fame, try to get, approval. You know what I mean? The power of approval, you know what I mean? Like handing everybody this like key to drive you. And you're like, holy shit, now I'm just a vehicle. You know what I mean? It's just weird. And I had to, not do that no more, because that's not life. And, it took me like 40 years to understand that even when you're working with people that you do actually love and that you do admire of their creativity, it's still not that. That's what you're trying to make it to be. But it's really not that. Because if they can't get a buck, get the fuck. You know what I mean? And that's just what it is. So it's like I'm really done with participating in that. I'm from Los Angeles. I was born in Pomona at a hospital that burnt down. And my first 5 years before I met my mother, I was raised in South Central. I thought everybody liked everybody. I didn't know until I was 15-ish, let's say 14 to 16, but 15, around 15, that gay was a thing, right? I thought literally yo, I like this person, I'm gonna be with this person, that person, whatever. Until a friend of mine who's in that church shit, said, gay is going to hell. You know what I mean? And I was like, that's funny. And I was like, wait, what? That sounds stupid to me. So already, we all grew up in some kind of church form or whatever. My church form never had that. We had gay people everywhere. One of my older brothers, he's gay. So around 15, that's when I realized, they're gay and straight is a different thing. You know what I mean? But I never had a come out story. I'm completely against coming out, people coming out. I've always just been me. I didn't know that I was different or an outsider. So my thing is this. I don't ever like to give people power, right? Hey, mom, hey, dad, I have something to tell you. You just gave them power to judge whatever then follows. Right? Because you have been taught that you are now different. There's something wrong with you. There's this. Hey, how me coming out was, damn, he fine than a motherfucker. Yeah, he is kind of cute. What you gonna do? Because what I'm doing is I'm very comfortable in recognizing that this other man is attractive. I don't give a fuck about your thought on me thinking that this man attractive. The only thing I care about is, do you find him attractive too? Because you have no power over me. Even if you didn't like it, then get the fuck away from me. What's your greatest gift in this world? Right? What is your greatest gift? In this world, what is your greatest gift? And I used to ask people this, and they used to say, oh, I can do this, or I can do this, I can sing, or, I can do this. And I'm like, bitch, that's not your greatest gift to the world. They're like, what do you mean? I go, your greatest gift in the world is you. So if somebody doesn't value your greatest gift, remove yourself away from them. Then they will see. And if they don't, let them live blind. Do you understand? So I don't fuck with people that whole coming out thing. It's be who you are. Nobody gives a fuck. But if you give me power to then give a fuck, then I will give a fuck. It's if you were to come out, right, and you have on all your fashions or whatever, and you're like, I'm ready to go. I'll be like, well, I guess that's what she's wearing. But if you go, how does this look? Now I have license to be like, you look like a damn fool. Or I can say you look beautiful or whatever. And if I say you look like a damn fool, you don't have the right to get your feelings hurt. You should have never asked me. You gave me that power to say that. Race, and it's funny that it's called race, right? Because it's set up for something that we can never win, right? So it shouldn't be called race. You know what I mean? It should just be called this and y'all niggas. And so race is basically just the perception of people. You know what I'm saying? Like how we perceive them. We look at them and we see a color, and that's what they are. They fit into this box thing. I like ethnicity. I think that that's interesting because you actually get to see a lot of people's tendencies from ethnicity. You know what I mean? Like us being African, whichever part of the continent that we're from. It's funny because when I meet an African person from say for instance, Zimbabwe or whatever, they'll be like, oh, you're just and they'd name another country in Africa or a tribe in a country in Africa. And I'm like, what? you know what I mean? But I'm not knowing because, we got brought over to the States and, all that stripped away from us. So race to me is just not even a race. Like, so I'm not running. I'm not trying to, win. It's just like one of those things where it's like, there's already a winner set up. And, I used to be on the side of let's fight that, until I started looking at percentages. Until I started looking at the evils that I would have to do to get even near that. And then I really realized that me trying to fight for my race of people is literally falling in line to whiteness and white supremacy. Say, for instance, Nike is Nike because Reebok exists. Nike is Nike because Skechers exists. Nike is Nike because Puma exists. If none of those existed, Nike wouldn't be so sought out. You need this thing to try to fight you. You get what I'm saying? Like with anything, you have to have a component to make you great, right? So if LeBron James only played with LeBron Jameses, LeBron James wouldn't be great. And so it's set up where the system of white supremacy, especially in the divided states of supremacy, is set up so whoever tries to combat it makes it stronger. Look who wins. They have not ever taken a fall at all. It's so funny. I was talking to my mother, who's 77 now, right? And this was like when she was 71. I asked her, I said, what has changed from your time to this time? This nigga went, Wi-Fi? She's literally right. We think we're okay because we look like this right now, right? Like we look like this and shit, It was niggas back then that looked like this in their way. You know what I mean? And their polyesters and shit. You know what I'm saying? The bell, every ounce, ain't nothing changed. Black people in the States cannot be happy. You can have joyous moments. You can have happy moments and shit. You know what I mean? But happiness comes with freedom. Happiness comes with this sense of fearlessness. Right? And you know how niggas be walking around be like, no, I don't fear nothing. I'm fearless. No, you are. Yeah, you are. Stop playing. You saying that is that. You saying that recognize that you have fear and you know what the fears are. You're just trying to say that you feel like you can dominate them or you can fight them or you would give it a chance to fight them or you're not scared to fight the fear. But you still have fear. I used to hate being in interviews and they would say the first black designer or a black designer from Los Angeles or an African-American. Don't ever call me an African-American. That's like disgusting. I hate African-Americans, to tell you the truth. Okay, so African-American is somebody that has been taught supremacy and fight within it, right? So capitalism, Christianity, and you're portraying this thing, celebrating the 4th of July. You know what I mean? Like this concept, like, well, we're here. This is our land. No, it's not, nigga. It is not your land. It's not the thieves' land. It's the motherfuckers that originated there, and you're not that. So boom. So, say for instance, your mother was raped. You're going to take your father's last name. You're going to take the rapist's last name and be proud of that and be like, yeah, I wear that on my back. I got it tattooed across my heart. No. America is not my last name. You're my rapist. You're my abuser. Why would I claim you? I don't like African Americans. I don't even like when African Americans, I'll just call them that, black people that, want to buy property. I don't like any of this shit on a land that has our people buried under it. Our people, the ones that were fighting for freedom to go back home. You want to stay and buy land and give that money to the people that were killing us. What are we talking about? What kind of circle is this? I know they'd be like, oh, circle of life, but goddamn, this seems like the circle of death. This seems like the circle of murder. You say that, oh, no, I'm for black people, but you're going to buy this white person's house and give them all this money so they can do it again and again and again and again and again. You're not breaking any generational curse. You are the curse. You're helping the curse. And that's what I mean about when you're trying to fight against it, because you think it's niggas out there that's buying plantations. That sounds crazy. Look, you know what else is crazy? That motherfuckers wear crosses. Hold up, nigga, that's my father got shot in the head, right? That's like me wearing a gun. Oh, no, this represents my father. What the fuck? Nigga, that's the murder. That's the murder weapon. You're wearing, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? You got motherfuckers black people having white niggas tattoo a white nigga on his arm saying that this is Jesus. So now the motherfucking white Jesus look like blackface because it's on your black ass skin. Nigga, there's literally facts that first Harry Potter book called the Bible. It's facts that it's a lie. It's facts. It's facts. It's literal facts. And they're still like, oh, no, I still want to believe in it. Oh, no, I still want to do this. And then they have something like factual in front of their face and be like, no. They have a transgender person in front of their face and be like, no, that's unnatural. Bitch, your stupid ass belief is unnatural. What are you talking about? Now, I do have empathy, compassion, and I do understand how indoctrination works. When you're very, 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 very low at something, right? Like it could be anything that you're low at, right? You're going to grab onto any hope that you've ever heard of. So a lot of black people are like, I have nothing. I have to hope that this will work. And it's not the fact that I don't like labels per se. I don't like you functioning from that. I don't like your perception of that. You know what I mean? I feel like the divided states of supremacy is literally a pool and everybody's drowning and pulling each other down to try to get that air. But I got to pull you down to get the air. I got to pull you down to get the air. But what they don't understand is if you get your ass out the pool, you can easily pull everybody up. And I do not feel safe in the divided states of supremacy. You know what I mean? Like we get murdered all the time because of your belief. You're not murdering us. You're murdering a fantasy of us and taking us with that fantasy. Nigga, all those niggas that's getting murdered, they're close to home. Those are us. We're just waiting our turn. That's what we're doing while we're trying to picket it. If you do the motherfucking percentages of niggas in the divided states, we will never be that. Whatever we're fighting for, we will never be that. That place is a white country. It's 70%, 69, whatever. It's 70% white. And then it's everybody else. And they have poisoned everybody else to hate you as well. Oh, well, you know, we need to just get land and we need to get this and we need to. No, we the fuck don't. Because even the ones that do get that are not trying to help you. Beyonce ain't trying to help you, nigga. And I love the last album. She ain't trying to help me. You can't beat capitalism with capitalism, stupid. You can't do it. That whole fight fire with fire, shut up, nigga. Everybody getting burnt. Understand, just because you're okay doesn't mean that you're okay. That means that you're just not horrible or about to die. I'll say like I live, 35 years in the States. And that 35 years in the States, I've had police pull guns on me 4 times. 1 to my head, other 3 at a little bit of a distance, but, you know, not like 3 body lifts away. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't live like that. And I don't want you to live like that. I feel like everybody that's non-white, cis man, should be prejudiced. Because what prejudice is just giving you that little sliver of protection, before you meet them. It's not allowing you to be dumb and meet somebody. You get what I'm saying? So as a gay person, I have to be prejudiced on every straight person in this world. Right? As a black person, I have to be prejudiced of every white person that's in this world. A white woman should be prejudiced against a white man. A transgender person should be prejudiced against me until you meet me. You don't know. Niggas has been killing transgender people decades, fucking centuries, like whatever. What's the longest centuries? Centuries. You get what I'm saying? It's like we should be prejudiced. That's not a bad thing. That's a safety thing. But you can't be ignorant as well. You know what I mean? Prejudice and ignorance mixes, that's when you're just stupid. You get what I'm saying? But I mean, that's just how that's truly how it should be. And I don't give a fuck when hey, that's what it is. Rest in peace to O'Shea. Love you and your family, everybody around you, all the witnesses that saw this, love to you as well.
Peppermint, are you leaving? Are you going to leave this? Are you leaving this country? Are you going to go?
All the time, darling. I'll be leaving this country in a couple of days to go on another trip.
But you keep coming back.
And I do. I mean, this is my home, right? And I know that this is not necessarily my homeland, my motherland, but it is the land. It's the home that I've come to know, and and so I would be. I think that we've been deceived into thinking that we are an other in this country, and that we don't belong here, and that we were just here occupying time. But I think it's impossible for any human being, honestly, any group of humans, especially generationally, to live on a land and be in a space and not influence that space, for better or for worse. We know that humans in America, all of us, and the corporations and the industries that we've built have contributed greatly in a not so great way to climate change and global warming and the planet's resources being wasted and burnt and all of those things. And so that's one way that we make our mark. We talk about this mark as the footprint, and that is because human beings left their literal mark in some way, shape, or form. And that it includes an entire civilization of people that was brought over against our will and had to live here and learn how to do everything, be involved in pretty much every aspect of how humans operated in this country was touched by enslaved people. You know what I mean? It just was. Yeah. And so it's impossible we are intertwined in that. It's impossible. We are as baked in as the racism that's baked into our country. And so I don't think we can just leave.
Inextricably bound to we are inextricably bound to the society that is America.
We can't leave.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us on this lovely, lovely episode.
About
another great episode of Town Hall about race. I want to quickly give a big thanks to our executive producer, Tracy Marquez, senior producer, Charlene Westbrook, producer, Corey Nixon, and post-producer, Amelia Ritzholler. And, of course, our music is by the remarkable LaFemme Bear.